Welcome back to Chasing Masculinity, the podcast where we explore the principles that shape strong, capable, and honorable men. I'm your host, Colton Wutzke, and today we're diving into Rule 17, draw your line in the sand and stand by it. In life, you'll face moments where you have to decide what you stand for, what you will and won't tolerate, where you draw the line, and whether you have the backbone to defend it. The phrase, drawing a line in the sand, isn't about setting physical limits. It's about defining the core values and principles that shape your character. It's about deciding who you are and ensuring that your actions align with those decisions. I want you to think about the last time you felt strongly about something. Maybe it was a moral conviction, a belief about how people should be treated, or even a stance on your personal standards. Now ask yourself, did you stand by it when it was tested? Or did you waver when things got uncomfortable? I've had moments in my life where I had to make a decision, where I had to draw that line and say, this is where I stand and I won't back down. But I've also had times where I hesitated, and I can tell you firsthand that failing to stand firm always leads to regret. That's what this episode is about. Knowing what you stand for, refusing to compromise on what truly matters, and having the courage to stick by your convictions even when it's uncomfortable. Too many people today drift through life without a clear sense of who they are or what they believe in. They let their values be dictated by trends, by outside pressures, or by fear of standing out. But masculinity, true, grounded masculinity, requires that you define your own principles and live by them. This episode isn't about being stubborn for the sake of it. It's about understanding the difference between conviction and convenience, between firm principles and fleeting opinions. To frame our discussion, I want to share with you a verse from Proverbs 27:5. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. This verse speaks directly to what it means to draw your line in the sand. It's a reminder that standing firm, even when it's difficult, is better than hiding your true beliefs out of fear or complacency. A man who avoids confrontation at the expense of his principles isn't being noble, he's being weak. In today's episode, we're going to break down why taking a stand matters and what it says about your character, the dangers of inconsistency and why integrity is built through action, how to thoughtfully define your non-negotiable values, the difference between standing firm on important issues and being rigid over trivial matters, and then practical steps to establish and uphold your personal boundaries. By the end of this episode, I hope you have a clear understanding of where you need to draw your own lines, and more importantly, the confidence to stand by them. Let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is understanding the meaning of drawing a line in the sand. So let's define what the phrase is. The phrase drawing a line in the sand is a metaphor for setting firm and unwavering stance on principle or value. Unlike a physical boundary, this is a moral, ethical, or personal boundary that once it's set, it defines your character and beliefs. This is not just about making a decision, it's about committing to a stance that reflects your integrity as a man. It is derived from literally drawing a line in the sand that you do not cross. But it is more than a physical boundary because obviously if you draw a line in the sand, it is quite easy to cross. It's not this physical barrier that's impenetrable. It's more of this moral internal stance that you are creating where when you draw that line, you will not cross it. Not because you physically cannot, but because that is where you are putting your stance. There's deeper implications to this. This line is not about these external constraints. It's about internal discipline. When you decide where your limits are, it becomes a test of your resolve. And when you cross your own line, it's not about you breaking a rule. It's about betraying yourself and your own values. Society today often pushes us as men to be flexible and adaptable. But there's a fine line between healthy open-mindedness and compromising on your own values, who you are, what you believe, and where you walk. So why does any of this really matter? You as a man, your character is defined by what you stand for. If you refuse to stand firm, you can easily become swayed by opinions and circumstances and pressure. No one's going to know where your morals live. No one's going to know who you are. You are going to go with the flow, and you're never going to build trust because no one knows what they're trusting. And drawing your line doesn't mean you're being stubborn on trivial matters, but knowing what your non-negotiables are and then just upholding them. If you don't decide where to stand, the world will decide for you. And I promise you, it's not going to be in your best interest. So what are the consequences of crossing this line? You're going to lose your self-respect. When you compromise on something that you once believed, it chips away at your confidence and integrity of yourself. You're degrading how you view yourself as a man. And, as I alluded to, there's that erosion of trust. People respect those who are firm in their convictions. If you waver too much, others are going to start questioning your reliability. And ultimately, it's going to lead to a path of regret. Once you cross your own boundaries, it becomes easier to do it again and again. And it leads to this self-fulfilling pattern of betrayal. So let's dive into these concepts a bit more. First, I want to talk about the significance of making a stand. There is power in conviction. Strength is not just physical. It's not about how much you can bench. It's moral and mental resilience. Like I said, if you draw a physical line in the sand, it really doesn't take much to cross it. A crab could cross a line drawn in the sand. It's not about the physical strength required. It's about that internal grit. It's about channeling your inner David Goggins and being able to push through and build your mental strength. People respect men who stand by their word, even in the face of adversity. Just look at history. Leaders and role models we admire weren't the ones who just blended in and went with the flow of society. They were the ones that held firm to their beliefs, no matter what. That is strength. So what happens if you don't make a stand? The weakness is transparent. Others can tell when you're hesitant or unwilling to stand firm. And if you compromise too often, you become a pushover, losing credibility both personally and professionally in your relationships. And this indecisiveness is easily going to lead to regret. When you fail to defend your values, you're going to look back and wish that you had spoken up more. Every time you stand by your principles, it becomes easier to uphold them in the future. Just as if you constantly betray yourself, it becomes easier to betray yourself again. So this commitment actually will strengthen your character. This process reinforces mental toughness and the ability to withstand external pressures. You're building your resilience muscle by trial and by constantly working it out. A strong man doesn't seek validation. He holds firm to what he believes is right. And this consistency will breed trust. Others will see you and view you in a more trustworthy manner because of how you stand firm in your beliefs. When people know you won't fold under this pressure, when people know that you are going to stand firm and speak your truth on what matters to you, they're going to respect you and they're going to learn to rely on you. A man who becomes dependable in his convictions could become a leader in his community, at work, and at the very least, to his family, in his household. You will become a strong leader built on a foundation that cannot be shaken or chipped away by indecisiveness or unreliability. The ability to remain unshaken in your values makes you a force to be reckoned with. So, what is the role of integrity and consistency in action? Words mean nothing without action. Saying, I stand for X means nothing if your actions just contradict it. How many people cry about the social injustice in the world? How many people put some phrase or some emoji in their bio to show that they stand in solidarity with whatever current movement is happening? But all it is words. All you're doing is pushing your own moral superiority by saying something, and words are worthless. They don't have any value to them unless you back that with action. A man of integrity aligns his behavior with his beliefs. He doesn't just talk about them. He will actually act upon what he is saying. And that goes back to building that trust. If you are firm in something and your actions back your beliefs, you're going to build that trust because people will know that you're the real deal. If you claim to have these high moral standards, but then just betray them when you're challenged, or you become agreeable for the sake of people pleasing, and that actually erodes your values, then all your credibility as a man is lost. This is why consistency is crucial. People watch what you do more than they listen to what you say. Your actions are actually going to be the lead of how people view you and how they can trust you and place you as a man in this world. If you live by your principles day in and day out, if you are acting upon them, if you are doing as you say, you're going to naturally earn the respect and trust from those in your community and your family. Your integrity should not be conditional. It shouldn't be, who am I talking to? How are their beliefs? Do I not want to step on their toes? And I don't mean disagreeing with people because you don't align with their beliefs and you want to only be a jerk and point them out and prove them wrong. I mean, you actually compromise your values in conversation for the sake of agreeing with somebody so that they view you differently, or so that you can conform to whatever mold is going to provide the path of least resistance. Your integrity should not be conditional. It should hold firm regardless of your circumstances. And failing to stand firm will erode trust. If people see you compromise once, the automatic assumption is that you could be swayed again. If your beliefs shift depending on convenience, people will view you as unreliable. This leads to being easily manipulated. Without a clear foundation, you become susceptible to external pressures. You become a mold that can fit in any situation. But that also means that people can use you as they see fit. And that doesn't leave much room for your foundation as who you want to be and the principles that you are built on if you're constantly changing them to fit whatever mold. So the long-term impacts of staying true to your values are you're going to remain true to your principles. You're going to cultivate deep respect and stronger relationships, and you're going to get a stronger sense of personal fulfillment because you're living out what you truly are convicted to believe. And you're also going to free yourself from that internal turmoil of regret. Knowing that you stayed true to your values, it will allow you to live with that peace, regardless of what's happening around you, even in the moment if it feels like you're getting fired on from all directions because You decided to stand firm in the workplace about certain hiring policies, or you decided to speak up when your local school started pushing a specific agenda that doesn't align with the principles of the community or the general health of the children going there. These sort of things may feel controversial and they may feel like you're conflicted, but at the end of the day, if you stand up for your convictions and what you know as a God-fearing man to be true, then you are truly living out your masculinity, and you will be able to at least go to bed at night knowing that you're going to bed as you. So how can we stand firm in a changing world? There is certainly a challenge of holding your ground. The world is constantly shifting. Social norms will flip on a dime. What seemed controversial yesterday might be completely accepted today, or vice versa. There are cultural expectations and even personal circumstances that are constantly in flux. The temptation to compromise comes from many angles. There are societal pressures. Where is society, or what seems to be society based on what social media has perpetuated as the cultural norms, where are they swaying today? And where does it seem like the general populace has their opinion set today? Or career demands. Is there some new policy in your workplace or a new job that's requiring you to conform to a mold that you're not used to? Or relationships, or even self-doubt. There are temptations everywhere to compromise what you may think is your true self. Many people take the path of least resistance. It's natural. It's what we want to do. Why would we want to intentionally seek conflict when we very easily could avoid it by just quickly conforming to this new idea? Adapting to trends rather than standing by your own conviction is easy. That's a big challenge for men today. Maintaining this steadfastness while navigating a world that often rewards this conformity. And that's where you have to understand what truly matters. Not everything requires an unwavering stance. Some battles are just not worth fighting. And not every disagreement should be treated as this standoff where you have a hill that you have to die on. You need to prioritize your fundamental values. Things like faith, family, honor, your ethical principles. These are the non-negotiables that define who you are. Trivial matters like personal preferences, minor disagreements, even political beliefs don't warrant a line in the sand. You need to discern what's truly worth standing for and what's just noise and what seems like a big deal in the moment but is really just another fleeting concept. There's this sort of strength and alluring power to being the guy as a man, embracing their masculinity, standing firm in your beliefs. But you really need to walk the line of, is it your belief or are you being stubborn for the sake of just being stubborn? There's a line between standing by your principles and being immovable in ways that really aren't going to serve you. Holding on to your ground on core values is a sign of strength. Holding your ground on petty issues can make you seem rigid and difficult. Ask yourself, is this a matter of integrity or a matter of preference? If it's integrity, hold your line. If it's preference, be open to discussion. Don't be a jerk. Don't be this solid object that you can't have a conversation with because you're so set in your ways. I think we all know these people. You're so set in your ways that you just can't even fathom having a conversation about something that doesn't immediately align with what you believe. There's no reason to be like that. That's not masculinity. That's not drawing your line in the sand. That's being stubborn because you're holding your line to personal preferences, not integrity. And if you do hold your line in the sand to these personal preferences, you are probably setting yourself up to retract that stance later on, because these are things that are not core values, that are immovable. They're things that may change or waver over time, and you could end up retracting your stance, and that is very damaging. If you boldly declare a principle or boundary only to backpedal later without some sort of strong justification, it's very much going to damage your credibility. Others are going to see you as unreliable, someone whose words hold little weight. Future stands will be questioned, and people will assume that you can be persuaded or pressured into backing down. Again, you're setting the precedence for yourself. So, how do you want to set that precedence? Somebody who has a very small subset of core beliefs that are fundamental to who they are that cannot be wavered, or somebody who makes that stand on every single aspect of their life, your principles are going to define your future. The person that you want to become, a man of integrity, confidence, and respect, it's got to be built upon firm, non-negotiable values. That's the precedence that you should be setting for others to see in you. How do you want your wife, your family, your children someday to view you as a man? Set that precedence now. If you let these principles that define who you are slide too often, you are reshaping your characters in ways that may not align with the man that you are aiming towards. And standing firm doesn't mean resisting growth. It means ensuring that your growth is in line with your values rather than being dictated by outside influences. Think of it as a foundation that everything is built on, not a box that everything needs to conform within. You are still able to build up and improve yourself and grow these pillars of your life as you increase and grow and change and adapt as you should. But you will have this firm foundation that all of that is built on, rather than this sort of box that everything has to live within and conform within. And that's where you need to only apply these principles to core values about who you want to be and not every aspect of your life, because what you would actually be doing is boxing yourself in. You would be limiting your growth. So let's move on to the thoughtful decision-making behind drawing your line in the sand. Don't make impulsive stands. A firm stance should come from deep reflection, not fleeting emotions or ego. Many men will make bold declarations in the heat of the moment, only to realize that they spoke too soon, or maybe misspoke and missed the mark by a little bit. A line in the sand should be drawn with intention, not out of anger or reactionary stubbornness. This is something you should probably have already premeditated in terms of you know where you live, not something that you come up with in the spur of the moment in conversation because you're probably going to misspeak, or there's probably ways that it can be picked apart and then you have to start retracting what you really meant by it, and that just opens the door to, again, this erosion of that trust and that erosion of how you're viewed as a man. So how can you define these core values? Ask yourself, what values are worth enduring hardship for? What if you lost your job or your house? Or what if you lost your stance in your community? What are the things that you know, this is something I have to stand by no matter what? I'm going to lose friends over this. I'm going to lose income over this. I'm going to lose relationship with family members over this. But this is something that no matter what happens, I have to stand by. And which beliefs shape your decisions and identity? What are the things that you constantly refer to when making decisions? When you are critically thinking, what are the things in your toolbox that you're using to apply these decisions that are going to affect your life? These beliefs that shape whatever decision-making you're making also shape your identity. Next, what are the things that, if compromised, would make you feel like you lost a part of yourself? This goes back to, can you go to bed at night without that feeling of regret? These are the principles that deserve your unwavering commitment. And this is going to require some self-reflection, journaling, prayer, quiet contemplation, whatever works best for you. Try these out if you haven't, or if you have something in your toolbox that you know this works for me, use it, and use it to help you clarify your convictions before you're making these bold statements and drawing these lines in the sand. It's easy to think that we know where we stand until we're forced to actually articulate it. So write it down. Write down what your core values are and why they matter. This will only help you, and God forbid you ever have to make a stance, because it's not something that you should want to have to do. It's not something that you should seek out. But if you do, it's going to help you manage any potential fallback, and it's going to help you make sure that you are in the right as who you are as a man, drawing that line. If you struggle to define them, that may be a sign that some deeper self-exploration is actually needed, and maybe you shouldn't be making that stance. And what if you're unsure? Hesitation isn't always a bad thing. It's a sign that you just need more time to reflect. If you feel uncertain about drawing a hard line on something, take a step back before committing. A rushed decision can lead to backtracking, which weakens the power of your stance. And as always, seek counsel from wise mentors. Learn from those who have stood firm in their beliefs and maintained their integrity. Older, wiser men, whether mentors, spiritual advisors, or even historical figures, they can offer perspective on what is truly worth fighting for. There's so much wisdom out there. All you have to do is take it in, use your core values to decipher that information and how it can be applied to your life, and use that to help you. Use that as a tool to help guide this decision-making process. And also surround yourself with people who challenge you to think deeply before making these commitments, but then also encourage you to stand strong when necessary. My wife is great at this. She will question a lot of the things I say, but she also knows that she's doing that because it helps me fully articulate what it is I'm trying to accomplish, what goal I'm trying to define, or what is my destination, what's the target I'm trying to hit. And I always don't have a clear path or trajectory or know exactly what that is, and she'll push back. And sometimes I'll realize I'm kind of in a false pursuit here, or it'll help me fully articulate my idea so that I know that my aim is true. And then she's able to 100% support me and back me as a man, knowing that she helped me fully apply my core values and principles and what I should be as a man to our family before making these decisions. Dr. Phil said, "You've got to decide whether you're going to be who you are on purpose or if you're going to let somebody else paddle your boat." This perfectly captures the essence of taking control of your own identity and values, because if you don't define your principles, someone else is going to dictate them for you. The world will happily tell you what box you need to fit in, what lane you need to stay in, and keep pushing you around so that you are on the trajectory that is set for you. If you do not define your principles as a man, you're not going to define your path as a man. And that doesn't mean that you can live free and do what you want. It just means that you're going to be conforming to somebody else's, even if you don't know it. Now, if you draw your line in the sand, that means you may have to speak up, and there's certainly a risk in that. Taking a stand always comes with the cost, pushback, criticism. There could be consequences at work or in your social circle or personal life. People may challenge your values, ridicule your beliefs, or even try to manipulate you into backing down. But failing to take a stand leads to an even greater cost, losing your sense of self. I think the worst thing that we can do as men is to lose who we are as a man, to become lost. If you become lost, you lose your masculinity. And I think the world has seen far too much of that lately. And standing firm is always better than the alternative. Even if it feels like the world's against you, compromising your core values leads to an even greater loss, the erosion of your identity. If you betray your principles to fit in, you sacrifice the most important thing you own, your integrity. The discomfort of standing alone for what's right is far better than the regret of knowing you abandoned your beliefs. And this is going to have an impact on others too. When you stand firm, you are encouraging others to do the same. Conviction is contagious. The ripple effect of one man standing strong can inspire others to evaluate their own values and draw their own lines. Your strength gives permission to those around you to also live with integrity and confidence. And lastly, your conviction is going to shape your legacy. The values you uphold now will define how you're remembered. Do you want to be known as a man who stood strong or someone who bent to every shifting trend? Your legacy is built on the lines you refuse to cross. So how can we apply Rule 17, drawing your line in the sand? Define your core values. Write down the fundamental beliefs that make you who you are. Ask yourself, what absolutes am I unwilling to compromise on? Reflect on your past experiences. Have you ever drawn a line and later reversed it? What was the reason? I'm not saying that you should never, ever do it, but if you do, it is going to erode your character, and you better have very good justification for it. Maybe you were in the wrong, and that's okay. You can admit that, but you need to analyze your past compromises. Were they necessary, or were they actually failures to uphold your values? Next, observe role models. Look at men you respect. What principles have they stood firm on? What have men through history that you admire or that have admirable traits actually died for? How did they handle the pressure to conform or compromise? Then you can evaluate your moral framework. Is your belief system structured enough to support future decisions? If faced with opposition, would you have enough conviction to actually stand strong? And finally, I want you to identify missed opportunities. Think back to times where you hesitated to take a stand. What held you back? Fear, uncertainty, a lack of preparation? How can you be more decisive and prepared in the future? Then just commit to the action. Choose one area in your life where you will no longer compromise. Draw your line in the sand today and stand by it with conviction. So as we wrap up this very preachy episode, let's take a moment to reflect on everything that we've kind of talked about. This rule isn't just about making declarations. It's about defining who you are and standing firm in that identity. It's about knowing where you refuse to compromise and committing to living with integrity. Conflict and pressure will come, but your response determines your character. You cannot control the world around you, but you can control whether you stand firm or waver when faced with difficult choices. Society will constantly challenge your beliefs. Without a solid foundation, you risk being swept along with whatever is easiest or most accepted in the moment. Not every issue requires an immovable stance, but some things must remain non-negotiable. Prioritize faith, family, honor, and ethics over trivial matters or momentary frustrations. If you compromise on your values too often, you'll eventually lose sight on what matters most. Standing firm comes at a cost, but the cost of compromising is greater. Holding your ground will likely lead to pushback. People may challenge or criticize or even try to pressure you into backing down. But the alternative, betraying yourself, leads to a loss of self-respect, credibility, and personal identity. The world doesn't need more people who go with the flow. It needs men who hold the line and refuse to fold under pressure. Your legacy is built on what lines you draw and what ones you refuse to cross. The values you define now will define how you're remembered. Do you want to be known as someone who stood strong in the face of opposition or someone who backed down when it mattered most? Your choices don't just affect you. They impact your family, your friends, your community. When you stand firm, you encourage others to do the same. So take some time this week. Define your core values. What are the non-negotiables in your life? What principles will you refuse to compromise on? Reflect on past situations where you backed down when you shouldn't have. What held you back? How can you respond differently next time? Identify one area in your life where you need to draw a line in the sand today. Maybe it's in your relationships, your career, or your personal discipline, whatever it is, decide, commit, and stand by it. I want to hear from you. Share your experiences and thoughts on drawing your line in the sand. Tag me on social media at Mr. Wutzke, and let's continue this conversation. Brotherhood, integrity, conviction. These things didn't happen by accident. They are built through the choices we make every single day. So stand firm. Be unwavering in what matters most. And never let the world convince you to cross the line that was meant to define you. Thank you for tuning in to Chasing Masculinity. Until next time, stay strong, stay principled, and keep chasing masculinity.